What's up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Creatives on Tap podcast. Today, we are in conversation with Mr. Gaurav Basu. Gaurav is a freelance illustrator, also known as Acid Toad, and he's also the co-founder of Kraken Inc. Design Studio. You can check out all the links which will be listed down below. Please check them out. Check out his work. And I think most of you will also know he's also the frontman and vocalist of the Bangalore-based band Inner Sanctum. So I'll put those links down below too. Check out the music if you still haven't. Check out his work. Highly recommended. I personally have had the pleasure of working with him. He's designed the logo for 11 Gauge Recordings. So highly recommended. Go check him out. Thank you, Gaurav, for joining me on this
Thank
episode.
you, Thejus, for having me. It's not many people ask me to do this. So I'm really happy to get on board and have a chat with you regarding this. And yeah, I'm glad that it's about the industry and about the creative industry in specific.
Yeah, this whole podcast is about creative jobs. I want people to know about these jobs and to know what options they have. Especially the younger guys watching this, so that they can follow what they're interested in. A lot of these jobs people don't even know about. So especially in our country, so it's nice.
That's true. That's true. I mean, that's actually very true. These are very niche careers, if you would.
Exactly.
Even in and I think when we were younger, it was probably a bit more niche as compared to how it is now.
Correct.
I think our parents were a lot more psyched when we were saying, we want to get into art or music and I want to be a writer and things like that. They'll just lose their minds. But I think right now it's because the industry is opening up a bit and there's a little more opportunity to earn a little more money and things like that. So definitely it's growing a bit.
It's getting more recognized in the country, plus demand is also increasing for
demand is also increasing. That's true, because media has grown so much. You need so much content nowadays. You need creatives in all departments, whether it's visual, sound, or just content writing. There's a demand for creatives in the industry, in every industry currently.
Yeah. Although Gaurav is a graphic designer, we'll be talking about another aspect of graphic design or the whole thing, which is the concept of branding.
Yes.
So we'll get into that in some time. Gaurav, if you can give an intro about the services you provide as an illustrator, and also some of the clients that you've worked with, and what kind of work do you do? And also, how did you get started in the field?
Get started in the field, I think if I am really honest about it, this is my only skill. If I have to feed myself and pay my rent, this is
that's what I tell people about.
I've always drawn pictures, and I'm not surprised that I still draw pictures for a living. But yeah, it is at least an enjoyable job for me. So sometimes it doesn't always feel like work as such. So that's why I've always enjoyed it. So it was a very obvious career path for me. Similarly, I've had also other friends also go into music and things like that. So I've also seen them do it and convert it into a profession. So I wasn't also afraid of taking my passion and converting into a profession. And I was in art college in Chitrakala Parishad right here in Bangalore.
Okay.
And I was a 5-year course, so pretty long. Right now, I think it's reduced to 4. But we were part of some 5-year long ass marathon that we had to.
5 years seems really long.
It's a 5-year art marathon that we had to run. But after that, I was interning at a local small illustration and design studio called Pencil Sauce.
Okay.
And that's where my journey in the industry began, because my work ethic and everything came from that. Although it was a small studio, I got a taste of how hard you're supposed to work, as to what the industry standards are, what sort of quality you're supposed to maintain, and how to continuously to make sure that not only are you maintaining a benchmark quality in your work, and then also improving on it and things like that. And then slowly, once you figure out the creative aspect of the work, understanding the business aspect of it, because it only comes with time and things like that. So that's how the journey started. Also, being in a band helped, because it kind of meant developing a lot of marketing collateral for the brand, for the band in that sense. So a lot of experience also came through that, in terms of how much of marketing needs to be done for a certain campaign, and how how many designs need to go out, and learning new softwares and picking up new skills like that. So both kind of helped me into this career in my formative years in the career to where I am now today. Today, of course, I sometimes work solo as it would, but that honestly is a side project. It mostly has to do with my personal expression as an artist, as well as I work with a lot of bands and
Bands.
musicians to be mostly the other musician circle and things like that. And yeah, that's like the fun part of the job, but I get to do it only like after work hours on weekends. So the actual work hours actually is 5 days a week, 8 to 9 hours a day, which is with Kraken Inc, which is a design studio that I co-own with my wife. And yeah, we've been around for like 5 years. Last November, actually, we turned 5.
Oh, nice.
So we've had a small start, and we still operate a little small. We have a very small team, but we have at least very capable professionals, like very young, dynamic professionals, and we all work remotely. So this work from home culture actually does suit us in a way.
Yeah.
And so, like, we just bounce off files and ideas of each other, and then the final product goes out there. But both of us manage the entire of the operations otherwise. We offer everything from branding to illustration to wall murals, because we have a fine art background as well. And yeah, we are slowly branching out to as many media like sort of platforms that are out there slowly. We are taking it one step at a time, because we are not one of those big agencies. And neither are we trying to be like, we're trying to create such mass content like agencies. We usually work with more boutique and smaller brands. And so our focus is on maintaining a certain amount of quality and understanding that those niche markets and trying to push those products a little forward.
Again, congrats on the 5 years.
Hey, thanks so much.
Like I mentioned, we'll be talking about branding. So correct me if I'm wrong. Branding is the whole, the concept of communicating the purpose and idea of your service, or the first service you're providing, or the company that you own to the end client. So is that right? Do you wanna?
I guess to define branding, it's a pretty broad,
it is a
branding. When we just say branding, it can refer to a lot of things, anything that can represent a company, a business, could be part of its branding. Let's just try to define it in that sort of a broad scope so that everyone can understand that. It's like, if you ask me, what makes a good brand, or what are the how do you recognize that something is a good brand and things like that? How do you define a good brand? While there is no simple answer to it, because there is a lot of nuances that you need to know to fully answer this. But at the same time, if you have to funnel it down and sort of condense it into a small sort of a definition, I would say that there are 4 key aspects that you need to look into when it comes to how to develop a good brand. First would be, from the brand's perspective, who you're selling to, which is a very important part, because at the end of the day, once you recognize your audience, once you recognize the target group that you're going to cater to or sell your service or product to, it becomes much easier, because you know what they're looking for as a customer, what sort of product you're selling, what age group are they. So a lot of the data drives what your brand is going to be. Even some amount of research, about your competitors, if is anyone else selling the same thing you are selling in the market. If they are, what are they doing, and how can you do it differently? So this way, you take informed decisions based on the market and things like that. So that is the first thing, who you're selling to. Second thing I would say would be having a good brand story. Now, I think that is more applicable to, I would say, newer brands as compared to an old MNC, which is present all across the globe, because they don't need a brand story. For example, if you go to an Apple website, they'll just directly throw their products at you. You don't need to know who they are, what they do. But for smaller companies coming up, sometimes it's a bit of history or a bit of the work ethos that they have, sort of which define that company and things like that.
Just to build a level of trust for.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much, it does build up some amount of trust between the customer and the thing. And since it's a smaller business, you want to know who they are. So then you get to know,
Yeah.
like, okay, this is why these guys are offering. They felt that the market wasn't offering, like, XYZ. That's why they've decided to be innovative and provide those, fill in those gaps in the market which other players weren't offering. Whatever be the reason, like, you get to know, like, a bit about the company and things like that.
Yeah.
Three is obviously design, because at the end of the day, all the information about the brand that you want to communicate, be it about your product or about the brand itself or anything brand related, there needs to be design, and there needs to be an aesthetic. There needs to be, like, a look as such that the
Yeah.
brand needs to be associated with. So, like, whether it's, like, say, minimal, whether it's colorful, whether is it going to be youthful, edgy, modern, or is it going to be slightly old school, like, those are things, like, that get thrown around, because once you've done the research, once you've written the story, you kind of know, like, what fits this brand, what sort of a look would, like, suit this story and this sort of the kind of product they're selling. And this or would it be appealing to the market that they're selling it to.
Okay.
These questions then start to play around, and then the design sort of gets developed. And number four would be essentially developing a brand language, like, where there's a visual language, a tone to the copy, a certain way they communicate messages, whether it's video or through print, whatever, however it is. As soon as people recognize it, like, rather, as soon as people see it, they should be able to recognize that, this is from that brand. So that's how
Yeah.
that brand has made its mark with its audience. That, like, you see a red background with a white swoosh, it's Coca-Cola. It doesn't have to do much. Like, it's been imprinted in our brains. Like, that image has been, like, played in our heads for so many times in
Yeah.
video, ad, print. We just know those things. So these four things together, like, I think if a brand has these things together, I mean, there's no guarantees. Obviously, everything is a risk, but generally, if you have these bases covered, you usually find a very strong brand.
Yeah. And also there's a subconscious element to all of this, right? Like the
Yeah.
last point that you mentioned, like Coca-Cola, for example.
Yeah.
Even ads also. So in ads, they don't even have to mention the
Yeah.
name itself.
Yeah,
And all
exactly.
of these
In
stays
fact,
in your head.
absolutely.
And
In
yeah.
fact, like, you're in the music production business, you know that,
Yeah.
certain jingles, once they become a hit,
Hmm.
like, for a certain ad,
Hmm.
like, it's very memorable and things like that. It goes on in people's heads for so long that
Yeah.
anytime someone hears that tune, like, they already know that, yeah, like, that's that brand and this thing, whether it's like washing powder Nirma or
Yeah.
whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
you hear that one line,
Yeah.
and even if somebody's humming it and not saying washing powder Nirma,
Yeah.
you will
Correct.
still know that, yeah, that's similarly like a certain color, a certain way. Coke is actually a very good example of
Yeah.
how strong branding can be, like, because they are, I think, one of the only few brands which also have their full name, which is Coca-Cola. At the
Yeah.
same time, you break it up and you say Coke. Now,
Yeah.
Coke, otherwise, it can have a negative
Yeah.
connotation
Yeah.
also, being, like, associated with controlled substances and things like that. But
Yeah.
they've still taken the risk, and it's not affected the brand. They're still making money. They're still, like, global MNC, and they've even managed to use their bottle shape as a brand
Correct.
identifier. Like, when you see the
Yeah.
silhouette of the bottle itself, it's Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how strong the branding is. Some amount of conditioning, yes. Obviously, these guys have the budget to, like, plaster the images, like, all over
Yeah.
whatever city you're living in and whatever media you're consuming. All that is there,
Yeah.
but it's still well done. It's
Yeah.
whatever resource they have, they've used it wisely. Like, they've
Yeah.
not wasted it in that sense.
The basic concepts of branding itself is done perfectly.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's like the fundamentals are very strong, so
yeah.
it's a very strong brand.
Cool. You mentioned that you work with commercial clients and artists, bands,
Yeah,
etc. So, what would you say are the hallmarks of a good brand? I know that you already spoke about all
yeah,
of those things, but just in these different aspects, right? In a commercial aspect, and also like
yeah.
in terms of an artist or a band.
I think there. See, one is, like I said, first thing that defines a brand is how, like, who you're selling to. Like, is it connecting with the audience?
Mm.
Any brand that's able to connect with the audience that's the hallmark of a good brand. Because the ideal hallmark for a good brand is, especially in the consumer market, if it's a product, if it's a B2B, it's slightly different. But if it's like a B2C, like from a business to a customer,
Yeah.
it's a more personalized experience, because I'm going and buying a certain product from a certain brand. What it should make me feel as a customer is like, this product that I'm using or holding in my hand is a sort of an extension of my personality. Suppose, like I say, like, yeah, I like craft beer. So, like, you go out there and you buy like a Bira or a White Owl or a Goa Brewing Company, one of those beers. You are feeling like, this is part of my lifestyle. I'm expressing myself. It's not just a drink that you're drinking. For you, like the run-of-the-mill Budweisers and KFs are not working, no matter how many cool ads they're putting out and things like that. You're interested in the product. So, like, these products have made a mark with you, with those ethos of like, hey, man, we are using better ingredients than the big mass market. We are like, some of us are like IT people or corporate guys, just like you all. We just decided to, like, follow our passion. That's where your brand story is coming in and things like that. So people are having a connect with these brands. They've also recognized that they have, while their markets are small and niche, they are able to exploit it, and they're not afraid to go out there and, like, come out with products that who are going to make an impression that way. And you're seeing it happen in multiple markets. One is obviously the alcohol beverage market with the craft beer and the craft gin revolution that's happening currently in India. We're also seeing a lot of like cosmetic products and things like that, where a lot of interesting brands are coming out and things like that. So it is happening, like, people are recognizing, like, that there is potential for, like, growth in the market, and there is space for new brands, which is very important. And once you recognize that space, once you recognize an audience, and you hit the right chord and you make them feel like, yeah, this brand is an extension of my personality, you've, I think, nailed it as a brand, because then you have a loyal customer. That person would automatically go to that brand, like, for whatever service or product that they sell.
Yeah. And could you talk about the artist's point of view also?
Actually, the artist thing is a little tricky, because when you're looking at from a purely brand, from a business perspective, it's a very straightforward, there's a market and that's what you need to exploit in order to gain your revenue. When you're an artist, it's again connecting with an audience, but on a more, there is a emotional quality to your work that is also, like, there, which is not there in a proper business selling a product to a customer or a service to a customer. That is purely being done for the whatever customer's gratification. Yeah, I want this cream, or I want this drink, or I want this whatever, like, and the transaction is done, they take it and it's over. With an artist, it's a little more complex, because the thing is, you are, as an artist, are putting yourself out there. Yeah. So you're also putting yourself out as a public persona, or maybe if it's a group of artists, like a band or something, like, so you're still putting yourself out there, and you're putting out content that is emotionally supposed to connect with people. So it's a bit tricky. So while the same laws of branding still apply here, the way you apply them is very different. Like, because certain things which works for a business, if you try it as an artist, they'll be like, hey, this guy's selling out, and you might end up losing fans and things like that. So you have to be sensitive about these things, and it's best when the artist is honest, because that's when you really connect with your audience. So you have to break away from the business mindset for a bit when you're an artist, but then again come back to it, because you don't want to end up losing money, because as it is, artists don't make much money. But you have to be smart about it. Like, you have to understand that, people are actually following you for your work, and sometimes your opinion, and they what they sometimes are not able to say themselves, they kind of see the same opinion in your work, so they are drawn to it and things like that. So you have to be sensitive about that. You have to be very approachable, because nowadays, especially in the days of social media, this is a different kind of branding that you need to do as an artist, that you need to be an approachable person. Like, you can't be like, I know a lot of artists are shy or like are reserved, but it works against their favor, because some people think like, they have attitude problem or things like that, like, they're very arrogant. It's not so. It's probably because they have anxiety, and that's why they're not
Correct.
interacting with people. But you have to make yourself available and things like that. So that is a very like interesting part of like how that brand is built as an artist, because you have to constantly interact with like people in the media, people who follow your work. If you're a fan, if you like have a fan base and stuff, you are expected to interact with them, whether be Insta, Twitter, wherever you are active and things like that. You have to understand that you have an audience, and try and keep some interactive measures like some live sessions and things like that.
Yeah, like you said, it's the concepts remain the same, but it's a little different at the same time. Because for a corporate environment, obviously they can't introduce everyone in the company who's the team of the company, right? But in a band, there might be like 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's easy to communicate with your audience and also create like a personal connection with your audience.
Exactly.
And especially if you're a smaller band, you should make this like a priority, because that's the main element of connection, right? And especially during this time, you might not be playing a lot of music, and the best way to stay relevant with your fan base.
I mean, you have to be innovative, especially I think in this day and age. I mean, you are seeing a lot of musical personalities trying to do things like stream gigs and things like that with good production. Like it's not just like 4 or 5 guys playing in a jam room. They're trying to build an atmosphere. They're trying to bring in that gig as atmosphere in.
Just to jump off our previous question, how do you apply these concepts to your own band, to Inner Sanctum?
I think it actually happened in reverse for me, because it's kind of like reverse learning. Because before I ever had a job, I had the band. Part of the learning happened there as well. But yeah, it is about like understanding that your own band also has an aesthetic. Like there's a logo also which people are used to. Like you've also been in a band, there'll always be that conversation. Bro, should we change the logo? No, people are used to it. Like fans like this logo. Like this T-shirt has been selling well because of this logo, and let's not change it. So like there's those decisions are there. So these are things that you do learn. Like so that's how you learn. Like that. These branding concepts are applicable everywhere, like things like that. And obviously some technical aspects, like creating collateral for social media and for promo, like making posters for shows and things like that, like designing for merchandise. So it gives a lot of like experience in doing the legwork for like how much effort and time and how much planning needs to go in order to launch like a release. Because a musical release is like a campaign. The designs need to be ready. Your marketing campaign needs to be ready. Your video needs to be ready. A bunch of things. So you have a checklist, like just like how you're launching a brand. Like your social stuff needs to be ready. Logo needs to be ready. Website needs to be ready. So essentially, in terms of framework, it's very similar. It's like I said, just how you approach it, the content, the tone, the approach is different, but in terms of like what needs to be done from A to B, it's very much similar.
What are the different ways to apply these concepts? So say you have a company, you're the owner of a company or an artist. How do you get started with applying these concepts, and how do you get started on creating a brand for yourself?
I think, like I said, like it firstly has to come with who, like as if you're an artist, you have to see who you're creating the art for. Like I know, like most artists, it's like you're creating the work for to express your personal selves. But at the end of the day, you are trying to sell that painting or that book or a movie that you've made or a piece of music that you've written. Like you are trying to monetize it to a certain degree. So you have to see like who's gonna listen to that music, or who's gonna watch that film, or who's gonna read that book, or who's gonna buy that painting and things like that. And similarly, as a brand, if you're selling a product or a service, you are going to have to see who's going to purchase it and things like that. For example, if you're an ice cream company, like you just want to launch an ice cream, so why should someone buy that ice cream, like and things like that? So they're like, okay, fine, ice cream that's generally meant for like young or kids, you say, because it's a sugary treat. How do you get more older people to get into it? And do you do you want more teenagers in your thing? Do you want some funky sort of a language, like, a bit brash, a little like, grungy, a bit kitschy, so that, like, it appeals to, like, college kids and things like that. So they're like, no man, I don't want to have quality walls. This one seems like a really cool brand because, like, they have some funky stuff. It ultimately translates into design, because the point of design is to be functional, but at the same time it has to be aesthetic in order to be appealing. So all this data that you have, like, data should ideally drive the design and the brand language. So once you have the data, it's much easier to translate it into things. It's not an easy job, but at least your work is kind of cut out, right? Because like, acha, okay, I have to do X, Y, and Z. So let's get to doing X, Y, and Z now. So like, so it really helps when you have all the information at hand. Like, say 16 to 20-year-olds find this appealing, so that will be our main market. This is what they seem to like. These are the colors they seem to appeal to. So you have a lot of, like, informed decision making there. Like, so yeah, that helps. Or, like, whatever this is what the competitors are doing. As long as you're listening to what your audience wants and you're catering to it in an honest fashion, I think as a brand or as an artist, you should be able to do them justice.
I think there's some great information there, because as a brand, like you mentioned, doing the right amount of market research so that you can communicate that data, like you mentioned, to a person like you, so that you as an artist can understand, okay, this is what they're going for. So I'm going to try to design in that way.
Pretty much so. Because once you have the data, you review it with them, with the client and everything. You're like, okay, it's kind of obvious which direction we need to go. Like, suppose it's some new brand which has a heritage thing to it. So, okay, maybe there is a historical functionality in the brand. So maybe a vintage look will work for it. So the way all the images are treated, all the brochures are designed, everything has a slightly vintage look. Another one might be a posh nightclub and things like that. So very different sort of principles apply there. So but you kind of know who's going to visit a posh nightclub. What is the profile of the average person that visits a posh nightclub? So because you're designing for them, essentially. You're not designing for the client. You're actually designing for the
audience.
Similarly, what happens even in UI and UX design, it's not like someone doing the UI and UX for Zomato is designing for Zomato. They're actually using for someone like me who's going to get on the app and would ideally want a smooth, like, experience of, like, selecting whatever I want, whatever food I want to order, and have a very simple method of going about the payment and things like that. So it's essentially these designers who have created that experience. They've created it for me. The client is just offering the service. So as long as these communication factors are present, like, your client understands this, the branding studio understands this, the designers understand this, it always creates a very good work culture as well, because there's synonymity in terms of, like, there's some synchronicity in terms of their thinking and the kind of they share a common goal, share a common vision. So it helps everyone sort of work towards with that brand to reach that.
So ideally, as a business owner or an artist, again, even as an artist, knowing your demographic.
Absolutely. Knowing your demographic is very key. It's very key.
Also, I spoke about this topic in a previous episode, where treating your band as a business is a very important thing. So even as an artist or a company, knowing your demographic, doing market research. So even as a band, doing your market research, seeing, okay, this is the response to our first single. Let's try something a little different here. Not everything might work for the first time. Also, as a brand, you'll have to constantly keep in touch with the response to whatever you're putting out in terms of social media, whatever.
Absolutely.
And kind of adapt to that. And in terms of creating the brand, again, the same thing, demographic, market research, and communicating that to an artist who can kind of keep that in mind and then deliver that as a final product.
Absolutely. I mean, you pretty much, like, got it, like what I was saying, like, it's it's pretty straightforward, but
yeah.
it does require a lot of parameters of thinking. But once you do that, it becomes very obvious.
They can't depend on someone like you for creating their brand, right? They can't tell you, okay.
Essentially, it's like, you go to a doctor and they treat you and they're like, hey, okay, you seem to have like, this sort of like whatever, some
ailment,
sort of issues happening with your blood. So this is a blood purifier, it will clean your systems. But you come back home and you still have stomach pain because you never told a doctor that you have stomach pain. So that's still resistance. So you're like, this doctor is bad. So then this miscommunication has happened. But if you're going to the doctor and saying, like, hey, I have stomach pain and could you check out what's up? They will prescribe you, okay, so this is what seems to be wrong. Take these few meds for these 3 days, this much rest, and you should be fine. So in a way, it is like that, like, because the more information you give us, we are able to use it to like help out the client and give some sort of an advantage. Obviously, sometimes you're like very lucky, you end up with a client who's done all the market research themselves and they already know what sort of brand they want to be. So the conversation is much faster, but sometimes that is always not the case.
As a recording and mixing engineer myself, I have the exact same process. Like a band comes to you with a vision, it's much more easier to kind of get that final product.
Absolutely, because if they give you a reference of like, bro, we want to sound like you have heard this album, and you're like, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and also like while they're arranging their music, if they work closely with someone like me, and they keep like sharing their work, and then so you get an idea of what they're going for, and then you try to kind of help them achieve that end goal. But if they don't have like a vision and they don't have like an end goal in mind, then I cannot help them.
I mean, you also at a loss at that point because you're just trying to like shoot in the dark, right? You're just hoping you hit the target without like thing. And there's not always enough time to do that much of like experimentation because everyone's on a tight deadline and a tight budget. So like if that exceeds, like, everybody loses money and the timeline goes on and on.
Especially over here, people, they try to kind of take advantage of situations. So they feel like a mix engineer is like a magician or something. If I don't know what you're going for, I can't help you. So the same with your line of work.
I think designers have something similar actually because they just because
we can't just come up. We can't just like conjure something out of the
because especially if we don't know what is required, because we actually one of the biggest fears of us as a studio is whenever we get a brief saying like, you guys are the designers, you do what you want. Like this sounds very scary. Because we need as a business owner also, you need to know what product you're selling, where you want it to go, who you're selling to, like I said, because otherwise it really is like we are shooting in the dark and it's very stressful in that.
I had a similar conversation where we are living in 2021 where information is available out there. As a self-employed person or as a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever, if you're going to someone for a certain service that they're providing, do a little bit of research, try to understand their side of things also, so that you can communicate your ideas.
That's actually a very good point. That is a very good point. I don't think it gets spoken about enough, especially because I think creative industries especially are kind of like, there's a bit of ambiguity like which surrounds all these industries. There's no clear-cut things in certain place because certain things are subjective, like this looks good to X person, doesn't look good to Y person, but it sounds good to this one, but doesn't sound good to that one. So it's a lot of personal preferences, and it's very hard to make people understand that those are not applicable in all aspects.
And that's another reason to have a good vision from the client side itself. Absolutely. Because then you don't have to think about subjectivity, right? Because then you will have to think about, is the client happy? Have you given them the best end product that they're looking for?
Pretty much.
because you can't think of everyone in the
But you pretty much hit the
audience.
nail on the head with that. I think so. There's not enough research done from a client and especially process wise, like what is the process that you would like to follow. Like I'm sure it'll be very irritating for you if I as a vocalist come into your studio and trying to record and I'm constantly cupping the mic. Like you'll be like, what are you doing? This is like unnecessarily prolonging the process. Please understand that in a studio, it's not a live thing where you have to hold the mic, you have to maintain like this much distance from the pop filter, blah blah blah. You're expecting the vocalist to know XYZ before he's getting into the studio. Like if they come in and half an hour is wasted because they're just not used to being in a studio. It's painful for you because that's half an hour already gone and things like that.
Let's talk about another aspect of the service that you provide, which is wall murals, which you mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. You have done wall murals at restaurants and workspaces and all of that. So why would a brand or company kind of invest in this kind of art form in their workspace or whatever?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty cool question. One of the main reasons we do it is because we have a fine art background. So since we have the skill, we are able to offer this service. So it's pretty cool. Honestly, it is a fun way to make money also. But there aren't that many projects on the horizon currently. But it's a growing market. But the reason it happens is there are a bunch of different reasons, to be honest. Like, for example, if it is for a restaurant, the purpose that mural is serving is very different. The purpose of the mural is to add to the vibe and to the atmosphere of the restaurant. It also becomes like a brand identifier. Like if you see a really cool wall mural at a restaurant, you always remember it. It's also a lot of free marketing because people are constantly posting it on Instagram, Facebook, and tagging them. So people elsewhere are seeing that particular mural, and it's really helping that restaurant gain some sort of social media traction and things like that. So it helps in that. In fact, I'm not kidding. Most of the restaurants nowadays have a requirement of a social media wall. It is a thing nowadays. In the industry, they all have this social media wall that they want to be present because they want people to be taking selfies there and whatnot. Because or some sort of a very identifiable, some art installation or something sculptural, which is very.
It's like the Ronald McDonald thing.
Yeah. It is pretty much just a little more refined and not so gimmicky and
not so gimmicky.
But
same concept.
In terms of purpose, it's actually very similar, to be honest. Because you go sit on that bench with Ronald McDonald. Similarly, here also you take him front of some mural or things like that, or there's some sculpture there, and you just take a photo with it, and it's there. So it is to add to the experience of the customer. For workspaces, from what we've noticed, at least in our experience, it is primarily for companies. Not that it's a hard and fast rule that it's only for companies, to these sort of companies, but a lot of companies that have a lot of or departments that have a lot of young people working in them. They want to make sure that the workspace doesn't look drab or intimidating to these people. It's basically to sort of inspire the workforce to make sure that, hey, this is a cool place to work. It's a nice environment. They'll have a nice corner with a mural with some bean bags and some plants and cool lamp there. So you want to finish off your presentation there. You just go sit in those bean bags, finish it off, and because you just don't want to sit on your desk. And so it adds a little value to that to your workforce in that sense, to your workspace. Sorry. Because
another way to get more work done, basically.
In a way, obviously, it does happen, but we've also seen that it does motivate people to when the workspace is nice, they have a lot of these cool artwork and things like that. They also feel a little youthful and things like that. One of the ones we had actually done was for IBM. The agency that was handling it brought us on board to finish the mural. And it was a particular branch of IBM that only deals and designs for Apple products. So usually IBM is very blue and gray, right? So this is the only office where they were allowed to use red and mostly yellows and greens, which was a
Okay.
big deal. Like
Yeah.
because like approval for these colors actually had to come from offices abroad to say like, yes,
Yeah.
we are approving yellow and thing, even though internationally it does not fit in within IBM's brand scheme.
Branding. Yeah.
Like so it was a huge thing because the reason being a lot of like expats from Apple come to that particular office, the Bangalore one. So in order to make sure that they feel that it's a different space compared to the standard IBM spaces, they decided to like add a little more color and like spice it up a bit, because usually IBM is a very fuddy-duddy, like very straightforward company, like
Yeah.
functioning in tech parks and then. So they wanted it to be a little more lively because they're like we're constantly entertaining and foreign clients and things like that. A lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans come in, and they wanted to add some sort of art and some sort of color to their office so that they feel like this is a interesting space compared to the usual places that they go to. Kid you not, that particular flow during the lunch break, all the IBM employees would come to that flow because it's like, this is like the happening flow, yo. It's got blue,
Yeah.
it's got not just blues and grays, it also has yellow and green. People would just be standing there drinking their coffee because trust me, the cafeteria was bad. Like on that floor, they used to have like cup of noodles and really bad coffee. So there was no reason for all those employees to come and hang on that floor. They just did it because it just was a lot more colorful and vibrant at
Okay.
that space. So like it was again adding value to that space, makes you feel a little more comfortable for sure.
Just elevating the
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
ambience.
pretty
Yeah.
much, absolutely.
Yeah. And like you said, they had to take permission from higher authorities
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all of
Like
that.
we didn't know it was like that
Yeah.
close that because I don't think we anyway were briefed about it by the agency saying
Yeah.
that these are the colors that you can use. We were fine with it. Once we reached the office, we heard about these things like usually
Yeah. But that's how serious they take
yeah,
branding, and that's a good
exactly.
thing because
Yeah, it
they
is.
don't want even if it's colors, they don't want the wrong colors
Yeah,
to
yeah.
represent their
Yeah, because
company because
they have a brand ethos with, and those colors represent a certain things globally. They don't want to like rub the businesses the wrong way that they deal with, like so they have a relationship with them, and they want to make sure that like they are that like from a customer perspective, whichever business is working with IBM,
yeah,
they are able to trust them. They are not going like, hey, IBM is going bonkers. It's just
yeah,
one office that they've kind of like spruced up just to be a little more appealing for a certain reason.
yeah. Even my studio, I had approached you to make the logo. I think before, no, after I started creating my first studio space. So my first studio space had blue absorption panels and all of that. And you had made a logo which had red and yellow
Red
and
and black,
black.
yeah.
Yeah, red, yellow, black, and all of that. And once I made the new studio space, I tried to stay within the
Yeah, I can
logo
see that. I can
colors.
see the red
Yeah,
panels there. Like,
yeah,
yeah, but you're getting it. Yeah, you're pretty much getting it because
yeah,
that is actually a very important part of it. Like, I thought we'll reach that at a later part of the conversation,
yeah,
but it is very important to keep everything cohesive because,
yeah.
like, that's how you know that there's a brand involved. Like,
Even though mine is a studio and not many people are going to, there's not a lot
yeah,
of
but it
foot
helps.
traffic here, but it helps
It
like
helps. Like
subconsciously. Yeah,
yeah, like wherever, like if it's your website, if that red is there, if it
yeah,
is in your actual studio space, it helps. Like
yeah,
on your social media, if that
correct.
red is repeated again, it helps. Like because it's kind of reinforcing that brand and that slightly color that color that people are associating, engaged with, like over time.
Correct. Yeah. I don't know if you have come across this in your career up till now, but have you ever come across a company during their pivot stage? Like, say, they have one product at the beginning stages, and then they introduce new products at a later stage of time.
Mhm.
Have you ever come across something like that? And how did they have to
In
change
my
their branding?
recent memory, I'm not able to place one, but just to take on the topic, it is a tricky situation
Yeah.
because, like I said, like everything is data driven, right?
Yeah. So,
So
sorry,
if
just 1 second. So, my question was basically how did you, or how does a company in that stage make changes to their branding? And how do you,
huh,
as an artist, also have make changes to your work so that it still remains the same?
Yeah.
The concept still remains the same.
Yeah, concept still remains the same, but it is tricky, to be honest, because ideally the best guys who have these expansion plans of increasing their product portfolio and things like that, and going more diverse, uh, already have it when they're launching the brand. And I'm talking about the best guys, because they're like, hey, we are selling beard oils today, tomorrow we also want to be into face creams and shampoos. It's like they're like, if the company is doing well and we are growing, then we are going to grow out into hair products, other hair products as well, and then maybe face creams. And it'll, because they might have this vision that in the future we want to be like full on into men's cosmetics or things like that. But when that vision is there beforehand, you are able to plan this as a agency or a studio much beforehand, because as the owner of the brand, you kind of communicate this to the studio or the agency, and they are like, okay, cool. So this is a problem we'll face earlier on if we only call you a beard oil company. So let's call it something else, so that it is synonymous with men's grooming. So the name itself you come up with has to do with men's grooming, so that you keep the umbrella open. Like if they don't go into those other products later, also it's fine. But if they want to, also that door is open. So you kind of like sort of brand it in a way that you always kind of leave the door open. You throw it out there and you see how people respond to it.
So would you suggest them making any changes to?
There would be, like, sometimes a brand might want to retain its main logo and just change the things underneath, like how, say, like a Tata does it. So you still know that it's from the same company. So there's a certain level of professionalism, certain level of trust from whoever's dealing with them, because that name Tata is there. Then after that, it's like TCS Services or Tata Steel or Tata Trucks or Indica, which is like a car. So it doesn't matter. Like you know that this is a trustworthy company, and they are trying to diversify their portfolio. But you will notice that when they're entering other markets, suppose if Tata is entering the cosmetic market, they will probably come up with a new sub brand. Or when ITC is always releasing a new product, like Bingo is an ITC product, it's marketed as Bingo. At the back you see the ITC label. So you know, the by association, this is a safe product. It is from a it is safe to consume because they maintain certain standards and things like that. But as per their market research, they decided, don't call it ITC chips, call it something new, and let's own this new IP that we've created, and create a new brand and increase their portfolio. So it adds value as a brand because you have more products under you. And but it has to be systematically done. It cannot just be like, tomorrow I have to today I'm selling this, tomorrow I want to sell this. So your focus can't shift that abruptly.
Also, it helps not narrowing down in terms of name also.
Exactly. That's what I said in the first time. Because like I said, that's why we use that beard oil example. If you start calling yourself beard oil, you're kind of stuck. Or if you're calling yourself a donut shop, and maybe later you want to make pastries as well. Now you can't. I mean, you can sell pastries in the donut shop as well, because it still has to do with confectionery. But if you just call it, like, I don't know if it's just called, like, sorry about this bad name, but suppose it's called the Sugar Yard or something. There's a lot of sweet things that can be made under that umbrella.
So it's always like, it's better not to narrow down too much. Like, say, Dunkin' Donuts, for example.
Exactly.
But do they sell sandwiches? I'm not really sure.
They do.
So if they sell sandwiches, as a customer, you'll be like, I would rather buy the donuts from here than the sandwich, because it's called Dunkin' Donuts.
Sometimes that does happen. I guess in India, sometimes it works out for these places, because we are just strapped for time. We go into a place and we like the convenience of
also Dunkin' Donuts is an old brand, so that helps. But say it's a newer brand, then it'll be much better.
And the thing is, we are kind of used to these big brands selling everything. Like you go to a coffee day, you are not expecting just a coffee. You know that they have sandwiches, pastries, blah blah blah. So it is, this cafe culture has been there. So we kind of know, like, even though it says Dunkin' Donuts, it pretty much functions as a cafe.
Can you walk me through your process for a particular project when it comes, especially like a corporate project, for creating a brand?
For us, step one starts with, like I said, we
Maybe
follow the.
your role and then your wife's role. How do
So
you kind of?
to be honest, like we
Okay.
split the work between us. But in terms of a process, we are very process oriented. So step
Okay.
one is like I told you, like the when we it goes back to the first question actually, what are the hallmarks of good branding?
Hmm.
So first is, like, who you're selling to and get all the data
Hmm.
right. So we actually have a questionnaire that we send out to anyone new we work with. We try, and
Okay.
even if it's a small personal project or a like slightly bigger client, we send out a questionnaire and we get a detailed answer back from them. Like, it has happened at times that we've received feedback that, hey, thanks for the questionnaire because it made me think about a lot of
Hmm.
other things, and
Hmm.
which I had not thought about earlier, and it's given some more clarity in what sort of a brand I want this to be, and a little more about how I want to market it to the target audience. So that helps hugely because, like, it gets the client also thinking, and they are also
Yeah.
responsive positively. So that's always the first step. Then the sketching process for the design starts. We come up with some rough concepts, which is only in house. That's an internal process.
Hmm.
Once we have a few good ideas, we shortlist like two strong concepts and then flesh them out. The reason we do two is because sometimes you give people too many choices, they're kind of spoiled for choices, and their decision making is prolonged and they are not able to decide. So we kind of just stick to two concepts and push that forward. And but we keep it flexible. We don't keep it rigid. Like, if they want to bring in elements from concept two into concept one for the approval stage, it goes into that. So sometimes, like, there's tweaking of ideas and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And then finally, like, all the designs get applied to, like, what are the collaterals that needs to go out and things like that, what the communication that needs to go out. So it's like a 3-4 step process that drives it. Like, first collect the data, then filter out like exactly what all needs to be designed, what needs to be done, what are the objectives of each collateral and things like that, who's it for, and then things slowly start to flow. And obviously, once a design aesthetic is developed, like, you
Hmm.
create like a design system, which is like, for say for headings you use this font in this bold letter, for
Hmm.
body copy in brochures you use this font. So there's a language. Same thing happens when you move to the website. So to make sure that portability, the font portability is there, you have to make sure that sorry, it's getting a little technical here, but like
Oh, that's fine.
for but to make sure that it works, you have to use web-friendly fonts. So you have to make sure that the like typefaces that you're using work online as well as on print and things like this. It's just like a lot of small things that that you need to tweak towards the later, sorry, the earlier part of the thing, so that you don't face any issues at the later stage of the project. So
Hmm.
once you have these ironed out, then things slowly start getting designed and getting churned out, and the content gets churned out and goes out.
What do you feel like is the average time that you take for, say, for example, like a restaurant or something like that?
Mm, I think it really depends on the amount of deliverables that needs to be, like, provided.
Ah.
Because sometimes people just need a logo and some
Hmm.
signage and a menu, maybe
Yeah.
for a restaurant. Say we are
Okay.
looking at only restaurants.
Hmm.
It really depends on the requirements. Someone might just need a logo and a like I said, logo, menu, and signage.
Hmm.
Someone's needs might be much more. They might need a logo plus signage plus menu plus, like, above the counter menu, and they might also want a wall mural in their space.
Yeah.
They might want coaster designs and things like that. So, like, the scope of work as it increases, it's going to take more time.
Okay.
But in terms of at least the logo development and the brand development, we try to keep it within 3 weeks if possible. If things go really well,
Hmm.
that process is done in like 3 to 4 weeks.
Hmm.
So within a month, that is out of the way.
Yeah.
And then you can start applying that design language onto the other things. And that execution is what takes time, because fleshing out the brand is the uh, mm, most time consuming part. Because once the designs are ready, it goes to the fabricators, and when the vendors come back with the samples have to get approved, then those
Hmm.
approved samples get fabricated for the final thing which is going to be installed at the restaurant and things like that. So it is a lengthy process. It's a step by step process. A lot of people in our experience have come to us and they're like, we are launching this restaurant in 2 months. We're like, it's going to take you at least 8 months for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Not because we are going to give it to you in 8 months. We'll give it to you in 2 months, but
Hmm.
realistically, like there's so many things. Like for example, a menu cannot be designed unless the menu is ready, unless the chef is like, they have a chef in house
Yeah.
who has designed a menu, has done the tasting, all the dishes have been approved. Only then can you get into the menu design.
Hmm.
Till then, you can just have a format ready, say that, this is the look and feel we are going for, this is the kind of production we're going to go for. We'll do some embossing here, we'll use this
Hmm.
kind of paper here. All that stuff you can have in mind, but the actual product is not going to be ready unless your chef gives you a menu and things like that. So
Hmm.
certain things are always at a standstill. So things can get delayed and things like that. Plus, in India, sometimes permits take a while to come.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
especially this restaurant has a bar, so for their license, for the bar license to come, they need to like wait for a while. So a lot of things get prolonged here because of these unforeseen circumstances. So you can't fully predict exactly how long it's going to take, but whatever is in our control, like just the visual design bit, we try to wrap up within like 3 to 4 weeks time.
Cool.
And if vendors are all, everything is in order, I think in 2.5 months you can definitely launch a restaurant. If like everything, but usually things are never so like smooth
Yeah,
sailing where
yeah,
it
yeah. I
happens
think they have to keep that.
that buffer period
Yeah,
in
that buffer
mind.
period is, yeah, is very necessary. I think you'll be better prepared also.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So just to kind of, as a conclusion, what would you say, with your experience, would be the mistakes that your clients make usually when they approach you for a certain project? What aspect of the whole project do you think that they can, you know, communicate better with you?
Yeah, this is actually a very good question because this again goes back to one is like, I think we already touched a part of this
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
earlier in the
yeah,
conversation where, sometimes people don't understand process, style, because
yeah,
in creative disciplines, there's also style involved. Like your style of production will be very different to another person's style.
yeah,
So you have to ask them, have you heard how I produce things? Like,
yeah,
are you cool with that? Because this is how I work and things like that. Similarly, even when design that, this is our style, this is how we go about.
yeah,
So one is to make sure that uh, from the client side they are familiar with the kind of work we do and respect our process and trust us and things like. But the
mm,
biggest, I wouldn't say the biggest mistake, but I see a lot of common mistakes with first time business owners,
mm,
which when they're about to launch their first brand, is like they're sometimes unable to differentiate between their own personas and the brand. It's a very very and it can get a touchy subject, because if you are personally involved with your brand,
yeah,
if somebody has a critical opinion on a certain aspect of it, you kind of take it personally because you feel like someone's being critical towards you, which
mm,
is not the case. It's just that you're trying to again take an informed decision based on the data and everything. Like you're like, hey, most of your audience seems to be like slightly old and on the older side and prefers, and this is the kind of income they have, so this is the kind of product they would want. Why are you putting out such a strong, maybe kind of abusive messaging, because which is more appealing to teenagers and it's not appealing to that thing. But maybe that person is a little edgy, even at 50 they feel like 15, but
yeah,
maybe the product they're selling is for 50 years old as well, but it's not for a 15-year-old.
yeah,
So it's the trouble becomes like trying to get that person to understand that hey, you might be this older person who still feels very young at heart, but we are trying to sell a very uh, slightly more mature product to people, and because of that you need to understand it. You need to separate your personality from the brand that you're putting out there. But it is exactly the opposite for artists, because
mm,
that's the kind of thing you have to promote. You're promoting that personality and things like that. So like I said, all these rules are don't apply everywhere.
yeah,
So it is tricky. But from a business perspective, I think especially new business perspective, this is the most common mistake I've seen people do, where they're sometimes confused between like, hey, I like it, so I want it in my brand.
mm,
I like pink, so I want it in my brand. What if your brand is a metal brand, like like they make like clothing for like metalheads and stuff like that. And if you like pink and you're involved in the brand, a lot of people will just not relate with it. Like, and this is obviously just like a very rough example.
Example, yeah.
But similarly, like just because I play in a metal band and I like a dark aesthetic, and suppose I want to launch a kids brand, I can't start adding skulls and like weird creepy stuff to promote that brand, because at the end of the day, those are kids and they're looking for something a little more like a little more approachable, a little more friendly. I cannot be putting weird creepy monsters things like for like say 5 to 7 year old kids if you're trying to sell something to them. So even if it's my brand, I need to dissociate that persona from that and understand that I'm selling a product to kids, and I cannot bringing any Sanctum mentality while selling to 5 to 7 years old. It's it takes, I think, some amount of experience, because most of the experienced people we work with, we don't see this problem happening with. They know exactly. They seem to take more informed decisions and they trust the designers a lot more. But for a lot of new business owners, this issue seems to be there.
Thanks a lot, dude. I think
thanks so much for having me.
Everything that I wanted to ask you. I think I even like learned quite a bit during this span.
I'm glad. I hope it was informative enough to like open up some eyes at least.
Yeah, I hope so too. If anyone did learn something, please leave a comment below. Press the like button, please, and subscribe to the channel. Give Gaurav Basu some love. All of the links are there down below, and you can check them out. Thank you again, Gaurav, and I think I'll see you soon. Hopefully, after this ends, soon. I'll see you soon. And
all right, man. Thank you so much for having me once more. Really appreciate it, and it was a good talk, man. Like I really enjoyed it.
For sure. See you, man. Bye.
Yeah.